standing outside Shakespeare's school here, so one of the next questions we might address is, what was school life like for the young Shakespeare, and what kinds of things did he learn? Many of the subjects that Shakespeare learned would be familiar to modern school children. He probably would have learnt a certain amount of history, a certain amount of literature, but what would have seemed very, very different is that the literature he studied would have been almost entirely in Latin. An awful lot of his time would have been spent translating to Latin and from Latin. That was used both to teach students language skills, but also to teach them the construction of good prose, which was a skill in those days called rhetoric. Nobody really learns rhetoric today. In its most simple form, of course, rhetoric is simply persuasive speech, or the art of persuasive speaking. But you can see how learning to shape good rhetorical speeches by learning from some of the original Latin and Greek examples probably helped Shakespeare in his later career as a playwright. There's hardly a play that exists in which one character doesn't at some point attempt to persuade another character of something, be that for comedy value or for villainous intent. So the things that Shakespeare learned in the school were very important. The school days were quite long, with a lunch break which allowed the children to go home to have lunch, come back to school. Another thing which would seem perhaps strange to the modern school child is that only boys went to school. Girls were educated in a different way, possibly in small groups, tutored by one of the local women, and would have had a very different education, focusing more on practical skills than intellectual skills. The boys would have come to this school from the ages of about 6 to 16, although we think Shakespeare probably stopped his own education at about the age of